What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. Welcome back, Nightmare Success listeners. This is where you come to hear what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Well, I've got one of those guests here today, and it's Brian Dion Williams. And we were just talking about, he's got the same initials of Brent Douglas and Brian Dion. He can always tell who he is coming in contact with in his town down in Joplin, because it falls into time frames. But Brian has a really interesting story. I got to talk to him on the phone the other day, and just quite a story that, it zigzags. I always like stories that, the vulnerability of zigzagging a story, and you see that somebody finds it. They find their way, and the way that Brian's living his life now is it's a redemption, inspiration type thing, and I always love to be able to sit down with people who have that. I want to get into all that, but before we do, I want to recognize our sponsor for the show, Auto Plaza Direct. Who likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots, looking for a car? Then you find that car, you spend 4 to 5 hours in the dealership just to buy the car. It's kind of like a trip to the dentist or a colonoscopy appointment. It's just not something you look forward to. Well, there's a better way to take away all the pain and hassle of getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They are your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go out and find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price, and they'll deliver that car to you. And it's all full service. They offer warranties and financing. So go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge. The new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them that Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. I am a client. Don Davis just helped me get a truck, and we didn't think we were going to be able to get it. And then all of a sudden, Don was able to pull a rabbit out of his hat, and we did get the truck I wanted. And so it all turns out good at the end at Auto Plaza Direct. All right. Brian Dion Williams, welcome in.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Doing pretty good.
Brian was just telling me looks like he's in his truck right now, and he's been around the world from Wyoming to Oklahoma. He's down Joplin, Missouri, where he lives, which is not down too far from the road where I grew up as a kid down in Springfield, Missouri. So it's good people down there in Southwest Missouri. Brian, tell me a little bit. You've got a wild story. Can you take us back a little bit to where it all began, growing up as a kid?
Yeah, I'll kind of lay the foundation. Basically, I was the youngest of 4 kids. There's 7 years between me and my brother and sister, but I had a brother that would be 5 years older than me. He died of SIDS when he was 18 months old. And so my parents divorced about that time, and they'd been split up, and my mom even had her tubes tied. And so they tried to make it work, and then in came me. I entered the situation. She got pregnant. They thought she had blood clots, but it turned out it was me. And so I was kind of a miracle baby. But
I would say so.
Yeah, and so that kind of laid the foundation for the fact that, I guess they call them a rainbow baby when somebody has a baby after they've lost a baby.
Yeah.
And so I came into this world. I had a lot of health problems. I was preemie. I weighed like 4 pounds 4 ounces. Spent my first year in Children's Mercy. Of course, I don't remember any of that. But what I do remember, what I do take away from that is I was raised up a very sheltered child and a spoiled child. I was my mom's next chance at having a child, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, it's like one of those, it's good to be the youngest and the spoiled and everything, but But I always tell people anymore, like the verse is true. Don't spare the rod, spoil the child. You know what I mean? And I basically, I was raised up by my mom, like I said, and my brother and sister were out of the household early, so it was basically just me and her. And we were very poor, but I never knew it until like junior high.
Yeah.
Because I basically had everything I wanted. It was in junior high that the name brand stuff started coming in. Of course, mom worked 3 jobs to make ends meet, so I couldn't have that. But through that, I learned, like, if I want those nice things, I was going to have to, I didn't know the word back then, but I was going to have to hustle.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I got a paper route. I was mowing yards, selling baseball cards, even selling candy bars and soda pops in school.
Okay.
I was known as the candy man, you know what I mean? Just trying to make money, you know what I mean? Yeah, the candy man, So, in my business class, they used to use me as an example, even because the teachers even knew what I was doing. And they're like, yeah, they were like, I was an entrepreneur in junior high. So, but, the wild thing is, I've listened to your testimony this last weekend, and there's some similarities there because, even though my dad was never around, my older brother was like the one I put up on the pedestal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, I really looked to him, and, at a young age, he went a little wild, and he ended up going to prison. And I remember when he went to prison, it was the first time was like middle school. I don't really remember that, but junior high, he went to prison when I was in junior high, and he would have been, 19, 20 years old. And I remember thinking at that time, I seen what drugs was doing to him. And I was like, I'm never doing that.
Never
you know what I mean? Like never going to happen to me. I was anti-drug. I started, I actually was going to go the other direction. I wanted to be a cop, you know what I mean? And, but my grades didn't coincide with that. So, I was just that kid that just wanted to goof off in school. So, needless to say, I was a pretty decent kid in school, but the fact was, I didn't, I wanted to skip school a lot to work, and I ended up getting kicked out of school. Well, the only, what way to continue after that besides getting a GED was go off into the Army. And so the Army found a loophole to give me a high school diploma. And so I went off there. I should have, had I went with the MOS, I wanted the military occupation, being an MP, military police officer. I would have probably stuck it out, but I let a recruiter talk me into being a tanker.
Oh wow!
And I hated every minute of it. I hated it. I was like, I figured out real quick. I'm kind of claustrophobic. You know what I mean?
That's a claustrophobic world.
Oh yeah, it's very claustrophobic. Nothing glorifying about it. And so being the young, stubborn, spoiled kid I was, when I couldn't change my MOS, I just left. And me and a battle buddy went AWOL from Fort Knox, Kentucky, and hiked like 13 hours back to Louisville. I caught a bus, and I went back home. Well, I thought I was just going to go home and go to the recruiter and say, hey, I want to do this. Well, before I got home, the military police and they call them the MIPs, they were looking for me. And so off goes my first, intro into being a criminal, because I was on the run. You know what I mean? I don't want to go to jail. Well, I was thinking the worst.
What happens, Brian, when you go AWOL and the military, what do they do?
Well, I was thinking the worst. I mean, I remember, like I said, I remember my brother. I'm thinking, oh man, I'm going to the brig. I'll be at Leavenworth for the rest of my life. I'm thinking the worst. Well, little did I know, after a year of being on the run, my sister started dating a recruiter, and he told me, he's like, no, he's like, you're still, early level. You know what I mean? Like, so just go in there, turn yourself in, get a general discharge in lieu of court martial, and go on with it. You can, because I was like, I want to go back in.
Yeah. And
he's like, I just want a different MOS. And he's like, you can go back in after 3 years. And so I went and turned myself in, about 2 weeks of processing out, and I was like, man, I've been running for nothing. That was dumb.
All you had to do was walk in.
Say, all I had to do was turn myself in.
Yeah.
Like the easiest stint I've ever done. You know what I mean? But I got that squared away, and from there it started looking up, because I got a job through a friend of my dad's at the time. I was doing on-site machining at nuclear power plants. Kind of fell into a nice little thing for a 21-year-old. I was making 6 figures, and for about 2.5, 3 years I was doing that. And
that's quite amazing. You would have been making that amount of money at that age.
Yeah, and 20 some odd years ago, that was a lot of money.
Sure,
I mean, it's still decent, but it's a lot then. But going back, when I came back from the Army, I came back, and I don't know why. I guess, being gone like that, it just it changes you a little bit, even though I wasn't gone for a whole long time. I came back with a bad drinking habit, and and that never left, even when I started working nuclear power plants, I just had more money to drink on, and I was just, I was partying, drinking, and just living the wild life, and but in between, working. So, and then they pay you to be off in the summertime, so you're laid off, so you get layoff pay, but just to wait until August. So, being paid to be off in the summer was just a big old party, and so I was doing that and going through some things because, with any addiction, I was just trying to fill a void that I didn't know I even had at the time, but I was trying to feel accepted and wanted and all that, and found that in my party people, and it was one summer I was in, and I by this time I'd moved off to Woodward, Oklahoma, and at that time Woodward was like the meth capital of the world, and I knew a lot of people that were into it, but I stayed away from it because back then I had hair. But yeah, I'm pointing at my hair like I have some, but back then they did hair follicle tests in the plants. And so I knew I gotta be, I can drink all I want, but I can't use no drugs. Yeah. And I didn't have no desire to, because like I said, my deal with my brother. Mm-hmm. But, man, it caught me one night, you don't think straight when you're drinking, and, the opportunity arose, and I tried, did a line, and well, I was hooked. I was hooked. It couldn't have been more than a week later, maybe two. I was cooking it, you know what I mean? Like, I was all in.
Wow.
And,
you really fell in.
Yeah. Well, and it was one of those deals, I don't know. I'm sure it played a part. I don't know, at the time you don't really think real clear. But, I knew once I started using it was like my job was done, at least for the next 9 months, because that hair follicle goes back 9 months. So I was 100% all in, and, it got a hold of me, and I was, I was cooking and dealing and running and gunning, and, it was crazy. I didn't last not even a year doing it, that I got in my first raid. And,
were you hanging around like a whole different group of people too? I mean, how did that, how did that all shift for you? 'Cause I mean, I would assume that you were a normal guy with holding down a job, a good job. And then all of a sudden you fall into a spiral, I'm guessing, with a whole bunch of different type of people in your world.
It was wild. I was basically living a double life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I was basically with this group of friends. I was just drinking and hanging out and being a good old boy. And with this, and then a totally different group of friends, pretty rough and rowdy bunch, bikers and different things. And I was just, I was just somebody I wasn't real proud of, you know what I mean? And the interesting thing was, my mom had her first heart attack before that. And so I'd moved her down there to Woodward from Joplin, and she was living in my house, and I basically hardly ever came home because of course I didn't want mom to know. But, when I did, I mean, I don't know. It was wild. She didn't know what to think, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But, I got in, of course, in that lifestyle, it changes you, but, it makes you super paranoid. So, I was carrying guns, I was, doing whatever. And I never brought any, of course, drugs or anything around my mom. But same time, I was like, I had this attitude, like, it's my house. I can bring guns in the house if I want, you know what I mean? And she didn't know that, you know what I mean? Like, she didn't like guns, but she wasn't, didn't think much of it. But I wasn't,
She have any idea what was going on?
Well, the funny thing is, and I was going to get to that, when I first got raided and arrested, the first time in 2003, she came to the county courthouse there, and I remember plain as day, my aunt and uncle brought her over there, and she's sitting there in that little old courthouse, and she just looks at me in my orange jumpsuit, just tears streaming down her face, and she's like, "So I guess you're not a cop?" And I'm like, "What?" And she goes, "Well, because I had actually, and I'm sure that, I had, led her to believe that in some sort of way. But I mean, I was, dressed, I kind of dressed, black BDUs and high techs and all that, because mainly with that anhydrous stuff, you're cooking in the woods. So, you know what I mean? It was just wild. But I think she just wanted to believe that, my mom was, still at that age sheltering me, and it just, I was the baby, and she just wanted to believe something good out of this whole deal. Mm-hmm. And so she thought She thought I was a cop. I was like, no, Mom, I'm not a cop.
Not a cop.
You know what I mean? But not a cop. No. So, but that was kind of the start of it. I mean, you know, I had 7 years of on and off. You know,
well, how did
I would go to jail.
How did the raid happen? Did it just, because that sounds early on? I guess that was a meth raid. Is that what happened?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing was, it actually wasn't even me and my dope cooking partner. It wasn't our lab. A mutual friend of ours that we shared chemicals with, he had an explosion. The anhydrous blew up. He had to go to the hospital. He got severe burns and stuff. Well, it was at his place out in the country out there, and he'd called my buddy and asked him to come clean it up before the cops found it. Well, little did we know, we get out there and we'd barely been there 20, 30 minutes, and cops start rolling up and down that county highway right there, and different ones and stuff. And so later we would find out that they'd already found it. They were just waiting for somebody to come out there to catch them there.
Yeah.
And and when they came in deep. But it was a wild deal. We, you know, at the time, we had enough money. I had we both had one of the best, two of the best lawyers around, and that kind of helped. And then that one, you know, it was a true blessing that I just, you know, they say don't lick a gift horse in the mouth, but I did, you know what I mean? But that buddy of mine, he had a rap sheet a mile long and been to prison and stuff, and I hadn't. And so, and he kind of looked at me like a little brother. And so, you know, we went through court, we went through all this trying to beat it up right. And he caught a couple more little cases here and there, but he decided he was going to, you know, I didn't even know he was going to do it until the day he did. He took a plea, and then he turned around on that plea, and he just told him, he's like, you know, he didn't know anything. I told him, you know, I just asked him for a ride. I told him to stay in the truck, but he, you know, when you guys pulled up, he had gotten out, but he had no knowledge. Well, they had enough, you know, people snitching and whatever else that they knew that was not true, but they could not prove it. So what they told my attorney was they're not going to let me go scot-free, but they were going to give me a charge of accessory after the fact, which meant like after we got there, and basically because they asked me at what point did you know there was a meth lab there? I'm like, well, when all your guys suited up started bringing it out of the house, you know, and which, you know, was a lie, but that's what I said. And, you know, and they're like, well, it's accessory after the fact. And I'm like, well, how would I, you know, but, oh, well, you know what I mean? They with that charge, they were going to give me a 3-year deferred sentence, which would have been a blessing had I, you know, straightened up at that point, because it would have went off my record. But I stayed clean for a little bit, and, you know, like I said, I mean, we could be here all day talking about what happened throughout the 7 years, but like I always tell people, I'm like, you know, basically it's one of them deals, like everybody has the crazy dope stories, and I don't really get into that because, you know, it's not, you know, not glorifying the Lord, but also, you know, I always tell people, you know, if you see my Facebook, you know, it says I'm not proud of my past, but I'm not ashamed of what God brought me through. And so when I share my testimony, I just basically say, you know, like the deal is like, you know, it took me to places where I never expected to be. I mean, from trips to Mexico dealing with the cartel to being in a basement in the country in the middle of nowhere, doing drug deals with nothing but your boxers on and guns out because you think everybody's got a wire or something. You know what I mean? Just stupid stuff that, you know, like looking back, I still can't even believe some of the stuff. I mean, like, you know, but for the, you know, for the Lord, I should be dead or in prison still. So,
well, did you get into situations where you thought your life was in danger in some of those deals? I mean, it's a Mexican cartel.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And see, here's what's crazy, and here's what fuels my passion for the ministry I have now is the fact that, like, when I was going down there dealing with the cartels and stuff, like, we took off on a whim, didn't even really have a connection down there, and you know, just picked the border to go through, and it happened to be Laredo, and we're down there and we start dealing with them, and little do we know we're getting followed and everything, and because we're the only two, you know, I'm American Indian, Native American, but you know, basically the only two white people down there at the time because they were in the middle of a war. This was like in 2005, 6, they were in, you know, they were in a cartel war, which they're always in, but it was just a weird deal. They knew us as the Sudafed guys going down there to buy. But anyways, my point is like you know, I had no fear to go down there because because of the, you know, the negative stuff I wanted to do. So now my thing is I want to go wherever the Lord leads me, because if I could have no fear for the drug world, then I surely shouldn't have any fear for the Lord's work. You know what I mean?
That's a good way to think of that. Use the fear and the positive. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, if I'll drive clear down to Mexico for that, but yet can't go across the street to help my neighbor, then, what's the point,
Yeah.
So let me get this thing going back again. This little hybrid one to shut off.
Hope you don't run out of fuel or electricity there.
Well, good thing I sell batteries.
That's right.
This is my office. I always tell people, like, you're in your office, I'm in my office.
No, it sounds good in there. Sounds good in their truck.
Well, yeah, but yeah. So it was a crazy ordeal all the times I went through. But I'll fast forward to the fact that kind of what set the stage for the big turnaround, as I call it, my Damascus Road conversion. In November 1st, 2007, by this time I'd moved back to Joplin, and my mom had eventually moved back as well, and she got her own place. Well, the roles kind of flipped because I was running and gunning so hard. I just kind of had trap houses here and there, whatever that I hung out at, but I didn't have a place like I had in Oklahoma. And so I would crash out at her place every once in a while when I wanted some rest and get away from all the nonsense. And I had totaled out one of my vehicles a couple of days before, and so on Halloween day I was at her house, and I had some friends come over to pick me up, and I remember just his mom still had never changed. I mean, I was just a baby. I couldn't do no wrong, even though it was obvious at that point. But I left there, and she just standing up there waving, just be careful. And so the next day I was trying to reach her because, of course she had a little Jeep that I had bought her, and I was going to call her to come get me, because everybody else was just, off doing their thing, and never could reach her. And so and mom, with her health condition, she didn't really go anywhere. So I got somebody finally to take me over to her house, and the little Jeep was in there in the driveway, and I was like, something's odd. I just had a feeling, and couldn't get her to answer the door. And so I ended up, the gut feeling was strong enough. I just kicked the door in. And when I did, my mom's sitting there, she was dead on the couch.
Oh man.
And
wow.
She'd come to find out later she'd had a massive heart attack like that morning, because she had her coffee sit beside her and stuff. But it was a rough deal. I remember it like it was yesterday. I flipped out. I mean, it didn't help. I was high and been high for I don't know how long, but called 911. People came over, and at that time I must not have had any warrants, because that was the only time I've ever had an encounter that was so volatile with the law enforcement there, but yet I didn't go to jail. And I think it's just because they felt bad for me, but I was flipping out. I was just like cussing them and telling them, get away. They were trying to comfort me, and I was like, no, you know what I mean? But I remember that time, because I grew up when I was younger going to church, and remember that time I'd never been so mad at God, because I never quit believing in him, but I just felt like he was through with me. And then with that, I felt like, like he was some evil puppet master just playing games with me at that time, punishing me for my stuff, whatever. It was just all kinds of feelings. But at that point, it really got real there. That was November 1st, 2007. And up until that time, it was all business for me on the drug style. But at that point, it got, where I ended up, at that point, before then I'd never used a needle, shot dope. And at that time I started shooting up, because I didn't care. Everybody that was around me knew I had a suicide mission, because my mom was like the only thing I had, And
she was kind of the buffer, the buffer for you to give her care. Yeah.
She was the only thing keeping me to live in that double lifestyle, even though the double lifestyle had kind of gone away the older it got, because everybody else, I couldn't fool everybody else. And I don't think I fooled mama, but she sure acted like I did. But, she just believed in me no matter what. But, at that point, I just didn't care, you know what I mean? And I knew, I can't remember, I was 20, I'd have been 28, 29, I don't know. And I was like, man, I'm just going to be like my brother or whatever, spend the rest of my life in prison, whatever, And so kind of narrowed down the people that would hang out with me at that point, because everybody knew I had a suicide mission. I'd, talk about, just death by cop, whatever, I was nuts, no easy way to put it. But throughout that time, I got arrested and bailed out, with different things, and got another drug raid in like March of 2008, and went on the run on that deal. And September 21st, 2008 was the day that I call it my Damascus Road conversion. I think I told you that last time, but it started like any other. I was cooking dope, and I don't know. You were talking about the violence and stuff. I don't know if you could see the scar on my eye right here, right underneath. There's kind of healed over. But a couple weeks prior to that, I had some beef with another drug dealer, and we got into it, and he hit me with the butt of his pistol right there, and caught me slipping, and stole a stolen car from me, and it had my guns in there. So, but anyways, long short of it is that morning somebody told me, we got up just doing our thing, and somebody had got a hold of me, and they were like, yeah, he's over here in Galena, Kansas. You know what I mean? We found him, and I'm like, okay. So I had another gun, of course, and I was like, I tell people this is the stupidest or the smartest dumb move I ever made was I couldn't find anything other than the ammo that I had in the magazine was the only thing I had, and so I went to go get some more ammo just in case I need more shots. And so I go to Academy Sports and Outdoors of all places, and mind you, I'm a pretty good sized fella now, work out and stuff, but back then I was like 130 pounds. I mean, it was obvious. I was high. And then also at the time I was on 4 States Most Wanted and my picture in the paper and stuff because I was on the run. And so, I mean, I was going to be spotted, but I just didn't care. I was blinded by anger. And so I go Academy Sports and Outdoors, buy a box of ammo, and thankfully they called the cops on me. And we got out of the parking lot, and then we just pulled out of the parking lot. I mean, they let me leave there. Of course, they sold it to me, but they called probably right after I left. And we get out there, and I'm in the back seat behind the driver here, and we look back, and there's a unmarked Ford Expedition that it's Expedition that Joplin had at the time. It was a patrol vehicle, but it was unmarked, and it got behind us. And in that lifestyle, all the cop cars, so basically know all the cops' names and their shifts. But we look behind us, and we're like, oh crap, and as my buddy's driving. And his girlfriend's in the passenger seat. It was her car. And we go turn off on 15th and make a couple other turns. Well, that guy didn't follow us. Like, okay, we're good. And so we get back on 20th, and we're heading down 20th Street. And he pops up behind us again. Well, this time we seen cops coming over the hill. When you're coming over, it's kind of where the new viaduct is now in Joplin, where the tornado wiped out everything. Right by the high school, it wiped out. And they're coming over the viaduct. You see in all directions. There's cops coming from every one of them. And I remember my buddy looked back at me in the rear view, and he was like, "Do you want me to give you time to run?" And at that moment, I can still kind of, it takes my breath away right now thinking about it all these years later. But I felt the meaning of the word arrested. You know what I mean? I really felt it. And I remember looking at him, and I was just like, I looked up in the rear view, and I could see his eyes. And I mean, he's looking back. He was ride or die, man. He was like, I'll go wherever you want to go. And I just, he just got out of prison not long ago. And I was like, I don't want him getting any more trouble for me, And I was just like, just go ahead and stop, And about that time they lit us up, you know what I mean? And so we pulled off on, off 20th Street onto Ohio. And when we did, cops come from that way. They were expecting us to run or whatever. And, so I remember taking the pistol and putting it, there's a map pocket behind the driver's seat. I shoved it in there and just sit there. And I'm just like, okay, let's see if we make it out, and they come up and they stopped at my door, the back driver's side door. And I just kind of looked funny, tried to play it off and rolled the window down. He's like, "Can I get your ID?" And I was like, I'm not driving this thing. He says, "I need your ID." I said, okay. And they ended up getting everybody's ID. I gave him, since I'd been on the run, I was using my cousin's ID.
Oh no.
And, yeah, well, he was in prison over here in Oklahoma, so I was like, he don't need it, and he's in prison, so I mean, it's got to be straight. Well, they all come back up to the car, and they're like, "Mr. Miller, can you step out of the car?" And I was like, yeah. Looked at them all kind of crazy, and they're like, "Yeah, you got a traffic warrant out of Newton County," and I was like,
how's that happen?
This? Yeah, I was like, oh no. And so they arrest me, and they put me in the back seat of the cop car. They get the others out because, once somebody goes to jail, they get searched. And so I remember sitting in the back of that cop car, and I mean, I'm still feeling just like, it's done. I'm done, and they start searching the car. And of course it was a girl's car. And of course, in that lifestyle, the girls there, they felt like they needed to pack everything around with them. So they were pulling clothes out and all this. Well, then I remember it was just like in the movies where, I don't know if it was an ink pen or flashlight or whatever. He pulls out that pistol, holds it up like this. and he was showing it through the other ones like that. And I remember just yelling out, the window was cracked open, and I was like, "That's my gun! That's my gun!" And they never acknowledged me, so I just kept screaming it. And my buddy, I know they could hear me because they were looking like, "Just shut up, dude." Mm-hmm. But I did not want them to go to jail for them, because I was a lot of things, but I wasn't that guy to get my buddies in trouble.
Yeah.
So, they ended up, they let them go. Well, they took her in because she had like pills in her purse or something silly, but they took me to Joplin City Jail. And I remember I got in there, and they fingerprinted me and everything, and they put me back in a holding cell. Well, then it wasn't long. They come back, and they're like, "Come on."
They figured it
come out of there. Yeah. They're like, they had my picture, my mugshot up on, it was a different mugshot, of course. They had it up on this big screen thing, and they're like, "We know who you are. You're just going to just fess up to it." And of course, by that time I was just feeling it. You know what I mean? I'm like, if you're the experts in this. And I was kind of just being a smart aleck, and they're like, "Okay, well, you think you're funny. We're going to give you a obstruction of justice." And that's a misdemeanor. And of course, feeling the way I was like, I had seven felony warrants. And I was like, well, if you know who I am, you know that misdemeanor doesn't matter.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Whatever. Give me what you want. You know what I mean? Throw it at me. And little did I know, this is where, like later on, God highlighted some things in there, like that little deal there. That was a life-changing move for me. And he used what man meant for punishment, and to glorify him, because the 45 days in city, otherwise, because if I wouldn't have gotten that, I would have went straight over to county jail. But instead, I had to spend 45 days in city jail. Well, they put me in a little 6-man cell, and I remember I kept. This was the first opportunity, mind you, that I'd actually really slept since my mom had died, and it'd been 9 months. And I started having some bad night tremors and stuff about it. I was reliving it, and I kept waking up just sweating and mad and blaming myself and everything. And I remember waking up one time, and there was nobody in this jail cell, and they had a sprinkler system. I don't know why they would have this in city jail, but they had a red sprinkler system running down the center, big old pipe that was dangling down. And I'm like, I looked at that, and I was like, you know what? I'd never felt more alone in my life, and now I was physically alone, not just mentally. And I was like, you know what? I can hang myself from there and be done before they could ever get back here to open the door and pull me down. So I mean, I'm not just thinking about it. I'm plotting it. I'm getting ready. And literally at that exact time, they have, the beanhole. You've been in there. They rack that thing, and they're like, "Williams, you have a visit." And at that time, I'm just like, who in the world is who's visiting me? You know what I mean? And so I remember they got me out of there, and they walked me up to the front, and it's a little jail. And so they walked me up to the front, and there's this little old lady there that a friend of mine, this girl I used to run around with at that time. Her mom was just a sweet little God-fearing Christian lady. And she was sitting there. She just I crashed at her house a few times and different things, and we had made her to believe, because I had a stolen Cadillac, and we made her to believe that was my dad's, and that I was a good kid and all this. Well, when I sat down, she told me, she's like, she starts almost interrogating me like the police. She's like, "So I guess that wasn't your dad's Cadillac, and I guess you're this, that, and the other." And I'm like, yeah. And she's kind of interrogating me, and I remember I kept thinking, well, she's gonna be real. She's going to be feeling pretty bad when she realizes, like, when I go back and I finish what I was going to do, she's going to think it was her fault. But, and that's the mindset I was in. Well, she told me, she's like, I'm sorry, I did not come here to chew you out. She's like, but, I did, when I found out you were in here, I put you on my prayer list. And every day that, since I found out, I've been praying, and the Lord just kept, pushing at me that I needed to come speak to you, need to come see you. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, well, he wanted me to tell you that you are not alone. And boy, that hit me like a ton of bricks, because just what I was instantly right there when I was going.
Right.
Yeah. And mainly that, he as we call it, he read my mail on that, or she read my mail on that. I mean, she knew exactly what was going on.
That's really interesting.
Without being able to know.
Really something fascinating, really, that she got in the car and drove down to the city jail. I mean, a lot of people might think to do that, but I don't know very many people that aren't your family that get in the car and come and say they want to visit the person that's behind the wall there. Yeah.
Especially the person that just, disrespected her house and all that. It's like she told me, she worked for the Department of Family Services. She's like, if you'd have got arrested at my house, I'd have lost my job and everything.
Sure.
But she still, through all that, she was like, I just knew I had to be obedient to what the Lord had. And that's why, today I do the prison ministry I do, because you never know what going in there and sharing a couple words will do, you know what I mean? And it was life changing for me. I tell people of course, like I said earlier, I'm stubborn. So I didn't go back, we kind of cried a little bit out and she prayed over me and I went back to the cell, but I didn't just go back and hit my knees and, transform right there, but he kept working on me and she kept sending me letters and, throughout the time that I was in the city. And, I remember I still felt like God just, like I'd done too many wrongs, you know what I mean? Like the lifestyle I lived was just too bad.
You'd worn it out.
And so, yeah. Well, no, I mean, I felt like it was too bad for what the Lord would have. You know what I mean? Like God didn't. He was through with me.
Emptied it out.
Yeah. I had no more grace and mercy available. But I remember going to a Sunday service just basically to get out of that little jail cell at the city. And this one little dude, this one guy was in there, and he was a rough looking old biker looking dude. Had beard bigger than the beard I got now, and he's in there telling his stories about how rough and tough he was, and how the Lord just got a hold of him and made him, just transformed him. And man, after hearing his stories and everything, I thought, man, God can get a hold of somebody like that and change him and turn him into, a great Christian man. And I mean, I guess I maybe have a chance. You know what I mean? And he worked on me a little bit. That guy tried to pray with me, and I remember telling him, me and God still aren't seeing eye to eye yet. And he ended up the next time praying with me. But fast forward when I went when I went ahead and went on to the county jail. I remember, prior, every time I got in jail, I would pray to God, and I would just cry out and be like, hey, I felt like I was bargaining with God. I was like, if you just get me out of this, I'll serve you for the rest of my life. And, needless to say, I would get out and I wouldn't serve you, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, but this time when I got to county, I remember thinking, cause I still had 7 felonies, and I'm like, I'm going to prison for a while, you know what I mean? Cause manufacturing, possession of sawed-off shotgun, possession of the gun they got me with, different ones like that. And I'm like, so I just told the Lord, I was like, man, if it takes spending the rest of my life in prison to stay off the drugs and serve you, then thy will be done. And, man, it was the toughest thing I'd ever said, honestly. Cause, I felt it. I was like, man, I'd rather be in prison than be out there on the streets getting high and everything. So, but I remember I stayed in county jail that time. I was there 14 weeks before I ever went to my first court date. And they'd given me 2 different public defenders because I had done squandered off every dime I had at that point. But, one public defender was over the drug raid in March that had the possession of a sawed-off shotgun, and, it wasn't conspiracy because that's what the feds do, but it was, like a intent to manufacture. And so, and the other one was over a couple possession charges and a possession of firearms stuff. And so when they finally took me to my first court date after 14 weeks, I hadn't really had much communication, been writing the judge or the lawyers and stuff, trying to figure out what's going on. And I just wanted to tap out and go to prison, really. I just want to, county jail. That's what they do. That they make it to where you just want to go out.
Let me out of here. I'll go to prison.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I did was I ended up, when I went, the one public defender over the smaller charges was like, "Hey, did your other public defender come speak to you yet?" And I was like, "No, I haven't heard from either one of you guys." He goes, "Oh, well, they dismissed those other charges." I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I was in shock. I didn't know how, what. Yeah, I was like, I don't know what to think about that." Well, then he left out of there. He came back in and he's like, "Okay, well, we got a deal." He's like, "They're going to, if you waive your preliminary hearing to there was a receiving stolen property charge and it was either possession of precursor or possession of meth, because I had both of them. But anyways, if I waived to those 2, then they would drop the possession of firearm charge and the other possession charge." And I was like,
"That's big."
Okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. I was like, okay. So I came in with 7 felonies. I'm leaving with 2. And, from being in jail and stuff, like, I was kind of, I was excited, but I was also like, I don't even know if I want to go back to the pod talking about this.
Yeah, right. Don't let anybody know this.
I ain't that guy. You know what I mean? I'm like, this just don't even add up. I mean, I know what I would think if somebody did that, but you know what I mean? But I was flabbergasted. So anyways, through this time being there, the same little old lady that had came and seen me, she had gotten a minister, lady that had a halfway house, a faith-based halfway house in Joplin. She had been coming to see me throughout this whole 14 weeks in county. And she came and see me the day after that, and she was like, I told her what happened, and she's like, oh, praise God, like, what a blessing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm still kind of like, I'm still in shock. And she's like, why aren't you excited? I was like, well, Kathy, her name was Kathy. I was like, well, Kathy, here's the deal. Like, I know how the system works. I've been in and out of the system for a while, and I know that these 2 charges and me being in jail this long, the next court date, they will give me an OR bond and set me out with some probation. Mm-hmm. And she goes, well, that's good news. And I'm like, no. Because I know me also. By the time the sun goes down, I'll be high. I said, because I got nowhere to go and I don't trust myself. And she's like, well, you go to my place, my halfway house? I'm like, well, yeah. I was like, but hers was for people coming out of prison. And she's like, well, I'll make it happen. So she went to the court the next week. I had a court date there, and she goes in there and gets me released, like furloughed to go to her drug treatment program. And I went through a 21-day treatment first. I had to go through that first and then go into her program. And then it was awesome. It was awesome. I really felt like, this is that, happily ever after deal. I got out, things started working out, started going to college over there at Crowder College. And, I got involved with a lot of ministries, doing like street ministries and stuff, going to church. And I mean, I was really on fire. But that was in like March of 2009, roll on over to like September 2009. The same little lady that came to visit me in jail, she calls me up. I was coming home from school that day from Crowder College, and she said, have you read the newspaper today? And I was like, no, I don't read the newspaper. She's like, I'll be right over. By this time I'd graduated from the program at the halfway house, but I was assistant manager, house manager. Okay. And she's like, I'll be right over. Well, she brought the newspaper over, and here it reads, 2 Joplin men indicted for guns and drugs. And I mean, they threw a stack of indictments at us. Those same ones they kicked out. That's why they kicked them out, so they could go federal on them. And so they used everything. And I remember thinking at that time, man, I was so angry because I was like, man, here I've done this, and this, and I'm still going to end up in prison. Mm-hmm. And she prayed with me, and I had that fight or flight mentality. I wanted to run, kind of, you know what I mean? And thankfully, rather than running, I called another friend of mine. Him and his wife were there like lightning fast. They didn't live far from there, but they were there quicker than I would have ever imagined, because they knew, they'd been through that lifestyle, and they knew, it was a time sensitive manner. And so they show up there, and they're praying over me, and I don't remember even what was being said, but I remember literally as they were praying, it was like I could see the Garden of Gethsemane. And, I could see, scripture talks about, if this cup shall pass, or, if this cup shall pass, then thy will be done. You know what I mean? Like wanting the cup to pass. And then, the third time, if this cup shall not pass without me drinking of it, then thy will be done. And man, it was like using my own words against me almost. Mm-hmm. I remembered immediately that prayer I said in county jail, where just a few short months earlier, I was willing to go to prison for the rest of my life. Right. If it meant staying sober. Now I got a little taste of freedom and success, and I was like, oh Lord, no, do something different, Mm-hmm. So it kind of it helped. I mean, I'm not gonna say it made it easy. I ended up turning myself into to the feds in Springfield and started fighting it out. And there's not there's not much fighting when it comes to the feds. Mm-mm. And I remember vividly. It was like it was right around Thanksgiving. Because I got released back out to the Hope House because I wasn't deemed a menace to society or whatever. So got released into her custody on the bond setup. And so I was still going to school and all that. Well, my co-defendant, which I hadn't really had much contact with, reached out, and he was like, he just basically told me that he was fixing to go in and debrief, but don't worry, he's not telling on me. So I was like, it was some other deal, whatever. I didn't hear anything else other than that. Mm-hmm. And so immediately after Thanksgiving, I called my lawyer, and I just told him, I said, hey, I want to take a blind plea. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know what that was at the time, but he told me, he's like, you want to do a blind plea? And basically the blind plea, because what they were charging us for had nothing to do with like the trips to Mexico and different things. And I thought if he debriefed, he's telling all, and he was the one that went with me to Mexico and stuff. Yeah. So I didn't want any more charges. So when you do a blind plea, you got the motion for disclosure, disclosure, I think it is. The one that doesn't, it locks it in. They can't go back and charge you with a whole bunch of other crimes later. And so I took it, kind of threw myself at the mercy of the court. And I took the blind plea in January. And right after that, I was still on probation out of Oklahoma for those other deals. And so Oklahoma got wind of it. They had me arrested, sent me to county jail, and I got sentenced 6 years in Oklahoma for that probation I had. But meantime, I go to Oklahoma prison. They come and get me. The marshals come get me, take me back to Springfield, and to sentence me. And I didn't know it, but like a whole bunch of people from the church had wrote letters on my behalf, and even showed up that day for sentencing. And I remember the judge. He looks at me and he says, "They did my PSI and everything. He had my PSI in this hand and all the letters in this hand."
Report for anybody out there in Costa Rica listening that doesn't know.
Yeah, definitely. And he told me, he said he had it just like this. He's like, "Mr. Williams, I don't know." He says, I've got to tell two stories here, basically. And he says, "I don't know which Brian Williams is standing before me today, the one out of this or the one out of these letters." He says, "But what I'm going to do is," he said, "I'm going to sentence this one here. But if you ever get in trouble again or come back before me for a violation, I'm sentencing this one." And I was like, "Okay." And I mean, mind you, I don't even remember what my guidelines were.
That's a big deal that he read the letters. That's a lot of times that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it was a blessing. And he ends up he gave me 84 months, and was my sentence. And I'd been locked up for 6 months already. So then he turned around and he says, "We'll do time served on that," which was a blessing because, as you know, they don't always count other time, state time. And so basically turned around and ended up 78-month sentence. And then they send me back to Oklahoma, and my time's still rolling there. And so I go to the prison there. So now I've got both sentences running. And, there's a lot, for sake of time, I'll kind of speed it up. But there's a lot of things that happen. Like immediately in the prison there in Oklahoma, I went right into a Bible college dorm and got right into a 9-month intense Bible college class that was like 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, studying the Bible. You know what I mean? And so really prepared me for my time there. And I was in McAllister for about 2.5 years, finished, did 2.5 on to close out that 6, and then transferred to Oklahoma, first Oklahoma Transfer Center for the feds, and stayed on the work cadre for a year there. And I mean, through this time I was doing college courses and stuff. I'm trying to do everything I could to, better myself. I didn't want,
So you were really using your time to educate yourself, and that was kind of your strategy in prison was I'm going to get as good as I can get while I'm in.
Yep, I wasn't going to let the time do me. I was going to do the time. I wasn't going to let it do me.
Yeah,
that's what I kept saying. That was kind of my motto with it. It was my I told people it's my belly of the well experience, or from Jonah. The belly of the well, or the 40 days in the desert. It was my time of separation, but time of preparation. And so through that, I took a bunch of courses. And then when I got to Fort Worth Federal Prison, the only thing I was bound and determined to take a VOTEC, and the only thing they had available was a heat and air class. And I had never had any desire to do heat and air, but I took it. And I took a seminary school too. I got ordained and stuff. But I remember when I got out of prison, that HVAC license, that really saved me. My first 4 years out, I was doing heat and air, but I finished out my time in Fort Worth, and I just remember, I was always trying to be, I wasn't that guy that, I wasn't, beating people up with the word or, a Bible thumper as they call it, but I wanted my actions to speak, and I gained a lot of respect in there. I didn't have to compromise my values or my morals. I had respect for, it didn't matter if it was Aryans or if it was Crips or Bloods or Serranos, what I mean? Like everybody respected my stance. They understood I was a Christian, and they respected that.
Which is a big deal in prison. I mean, it's a very primitive environment, but if you have respect in prison, and it comes from a lot of different places, somebody could be really good on helping right people's motions. Some people can, there's so many different things in prison, but if you carry that respect piece, your time's different.
Yeah, it is. It's a game changer. I mean, and for them to, like I tell people, it's not cool to be Christian in prison.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they didn't respect me because I was Christian. They respect me because I wasn't fake.
Right.
And so they respected the fact that I wouldn't waver on it. But I also didn't treat them like anything less. What I mean? Like, it's not belittling. Like, oh, you don't believe in God. So, I had in my workout car, I had a guy that was a pagan priest. You know what I mean? But he's like, for old Christian boy, you're all right. You know what I mean? But I still remember getting out in 2014, got outside of them gates, and man, first time I really actually kind of cried. It ain't cool to cry in prison, but I cried on the way home, just on that bus
Who was
ride.
there to get
thinking,
you when you got out of prison, Brian?
Nobody. They put me on the bus and sent me up to Springfield. But I had throughout while I was locked up, I had friends and mentors from the church that wrote the letter.
Yeah.
They were that church really stood behind me, and the people, man, they supported me, and stayed in contact. They'd drive down to Fort Worth and visit me and stuff.
Wow.
And that was really all I had. My dad passed away while I was in prison. My sister and stuff, people still didn't, was kind of through with me, and I don't blame them. I mean, I was through with myself at the time. It took me the first, no kidding, like my first 2-3 years in prison, I didn't even like to shave. That's why I ended up growing a beard, because I didn't want to look at myself in the mirror. I still hated the guy. I still hated the guy that I looked at. You know what I mean? And it took me some groundbreaking stuff. I did the RDAP program in prison, in the feds. I don't know if you heard about it, but that was a game changer for me and helped me. Oh yeah. I did it. I didn't get the year off because of my gun charge, but I did it and I'm so grateful I did, because that was the moment that just changed me as far as being able to look in the mirror and not blame that guy for putting me here. You know what I mean?
And for those that don't know, the program is really rational behavioral thinking, and it really makes you, look at and decipher, why you do things, why you think the way you do, why, and solutions to that. And, I think, there's a lot of good pieces to that program if it's administered properly. There's some people that are teaching that program that want to be cops, and they'll set people back and do different things that aren't productive. But mostly, I think, the program itself has good aspects to it.
We had some amazing people in there, and I guess if I could ever choose one thing just to do, it'd be go back and be an RDAP coordinator. Because they really have an impact that they don't even know, because still to this day, I still use what I learned in there. You know what I mean? Like the setting boundaries and stuff. When I'm mentoring people, I basically, because I still got my books and stuff in there, I basically kind of go through that. I got it memorized, and I kind of go through, the healthy boundaries and setting different things. And, it was impactful. But that helped me to actually, love the man I am. You know what I mean? Love myself.
Well, Brian,
can't love yourself, can't love nobody.
Let me ask you this, though, because you did real time, and while you were doing your time, you were really making yourself a better version of yourself. What were you thinking about getting out? What was your thought process? What were you thinking? Like, I'm getting out of here. You had learned some trades, so I mean, you wasn't like you weren't someone that could probably get on somewhere. What was going through your mind?
Well, I mean, of course, I was learning trades and wanting to make sure, financially I was all right, because I didn't have much out there. I had lost a lot, but more than anything, it was, preparation for, because I knew the Lord had, because, I was always told, scripture says those who he calls, he equips. And I knew that what I was going through was my equipping. I did not know at the time. I had never had any intention to go back in and do prison ministry. It wasn't really a goal, I guess you'd say. But I just knew I knew I had a story to tell. Mm-hmm. And like every chance I got while I was in there, I shared my testimony. And as well, I also, when I was in there, I kind of was like, I was trying to figure out some things. I talked to a ton of guys in there, and figured out like there's a common denominator. Like most guys, majority of the people that are in there that I dealt with either come from broken homes, absent fathers that didn't care, fathers that were working too much, whatever. Yeah, something like that. There was very few. There was a couple that I ran into that were like, yeah, my dad was perfect, my mom was perfect. I'm a knucklehead. Yeah. But for the most part, they had that same story I had with dad not being around and kind of just doing what they wanted. You know what I mean? Like mom couldn't control them after a certain age. And so that I was kind of like, researching that, I guess you'd say, what I mean? I'm very analytical. So I was analyzing every aspect of it. And most of all, I was trying to figure out how I wasn't going to become that person that just keeps coming back to prison. Sure. Because even the time I was in there, I seen guys come back 3 or 4 times in a year. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? I was like, I am not coming back to prison. I'm not. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to do right. I'm getting out. I've got that mindset.
Whatever I got to do, right.
Yeah, and that's really what it boiled down to. I was like, I'm not going to let this time become me. You know what I mean? And that was really the big thing. I mean, I had goals and stuff, and my life right now looks a lot different than I ever imagined, even in there. You know what I mean? And that's what's cool about it. We set plans, but God changes those plans. You know,
walk us through a little bit about how your life is now. Because I think the really cool thing about your story is how you are giving back and doing things that you learned to help other people, which is, a big part of this podcast is about, inspiring people to break, in the prisons of their own mind to set themselves free. And you have embodied that with what you've done and how you've done it. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't even got out of the federal halfway house. I did 9 months there. And just on my home visits coming back home, I had the same friends that came and prayed with me after I found out I was indicted. They reached out to me and they were like, I was actually home planning on the weekends, doing home visits to their house after a little bit. And they're like, here, we're going to go to this recovery house in Webb City, and we do a Saturday night Celebrate Recovery class. And so I went as a visitor, and ended up the guys I got to talking to them, they wanted to hear my testimony. So shared my testimony, and they were amazed at the fact that not only I shared the same testimony, but here I am, I'm still in the federal halfway house coming down there.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they were fascinated with that. And I ended up helping to lead the class and mentor guys. And, really there's a lot of guys that I still, have a good relationship with now, that I was able to pour into and when you pour into guys like that, it's mentoring them. They actually teach you more than you teach them sometimes. Sure. You know what I mean? And so, through that, I wasn't going to come back to Joplin. I had swore that, I called it the Lion's Den. I was like, I'm not coming back there. I was going to get a fresh start in Springfield. Yeah. Little did I know that Springfield's way worse than Joplin with the epidemic. But I was like, man, I'm not coming back. Well, that HVAC license opened up a door. A friend of mine was like, hey, I know the owner of a HVAC company here. I can get you a job. And so it kind of opened that door to end up coming back. And so I ended up back in Joplin, right in the Lion's Den, like Daniel. And I ended up, I was leading those classes. I was doing like a Monday night, Saturday night class, and just really pouring into people. Through church, I got introduced. I got, kind of set up on a blind date type deal with a friend of mine's friend. And we went to lunch and stuff, and ended up I was not looking for a relationship, because I've seen guys like fail so many times, get out and just get focused on a relationship. But I was only a few months out of the halfway house, had my own little place, and got introduced, and ended up being the greatest blind date I've ever had in my life. Now my wife of
that is a good blind date.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and but the crazy thing was, she's totally 100% opposite of me. She's never even had a traffic ticket, raised up in church her whole life. Yeah. And I really thought I don't have a chance with her. And honestly, we both set out for the same thing, because she came out of an ugly divorce and stuff. And she was like, we both tried to scare each other off, just putting all our baggage on the table one night at Logan's Steakhouse. And we were there for like way after closing. They were running us off. But needless to say, we ended up, we're like, it worked out.
Opposites attract.
Well, and it just, that brokenness brought us together. Sure. You know what I mean? And most of all, the vulnerability, because one thing I've learned throughout this, with all the lies and deceit and everything I had, now I'm transparent until it hurts, as I tell people. You know what I mean? And so I'm going to tell you the truth, no matter how bad it is, no matter what it looks like for either one of us.
Yeah, and that's very liberating too, Brian. To be
it is. It
vulnerable and transparent and real. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is key for sobriety, really, for me. And, just in general, but, it's just, it was just interesting. And, her family welcomed me in like no other, and I thought, I remember going to our second date, besides Logan's, our second date was to my nephew that we went to the graduation this weekend. It was his basketball game. So her whole family, they're very family orientated. The whole family was there. Grandma, mom, dad, everybody.
And he wanted that. I mean, that's what you were, craving.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't know it at the time, but yeah, I was craving it. And then it's like, I asked her, I was like, so how much do they know about my past? And she goes, oh, I don't hide nothing from them. They know everything. And I'm like, oh God, I know what I would think if I had a daughter and she brought this ex-con, I'm like, I'd be chasing him off with a gun. I don't know, but no, they loved me like I was their own, and it was pretty cool. But we started going to a church that we had actually helped launch a church. And I became an outreach pastor there. Did a lot of, done a lot of ministries and stuff. I still do. We're going to that church has since closed down. I go to a different church in town, but lead the men's group and just every opportunity serving. And here recently, I tell people I fought for 7 years after I got out of prison to get. I carry this around with me. Which
I got one of those in my wallet.
That.
Yep.
Yeah, I carry that as a reminder, but now I got this one to go with it.
All right.
That's my prison ID to go into Oklahoma prison.
That's a full cycle right there.
Yeah, I use it. I kind of put it in there and I show the guys, we're not really that much different, you know what I mean? But if God can do it for me, he can do it for them.
Well, for those who aren't watching on YouTube, Brian just showed his prison ID, his federal prison ID, the red card, and then he showed the badge to get in to talk and be able to help people inside the prison, which is a big deal. Which, by the way, your testimony and interview goes into 275 prisons. They're not federal prisons, but they're state prisons. This podcast does. So, the whole idea is those guys listen to that and see that, hey, man, people can make it out here. Breaking the narrative down.
That's my goal. I mean, because when I go into prisons, more than anything, I just share life after prison. You know what I mean? Like there's hope because everything that they told me or that you hear while you're in prison isn't true. Like as far as oh, you can't get a job. Well, I'm not with the heat and air company anymore. Obviously, I'm with my battery outfitters, and I've worked my way up to a supervisor position and stuff. And we hire felons. There's so many people that hire felons because they're not necessarily hiring felons. They're hiring character. You know what I mean? Like I hire people left and right. I just did an interview earlier today, but I tell them if you just be honest with me, let me know what's going on. And the fact is it your past? You know what I mean? And that's what my first employer with the heat and air company asked me when I shared my situation with him. He says, well, all I got to ask you is it in your past now? Yeah. You know what I mean? Are you done? Are you done now? And I was like, yes, sir, I am. He's like, that's all I care about. You know what I mean? So there is hope. And just like when another thing, being in the feds too, you understand you can't ever get they say you can't ever get early release if you have a gun charge off of your paper time. I had 5 years of paper. Well, I had a deal. It was kind of an interesting deal. I had entered a local drawing to win a cruise, and I ended up winning that cruise. Well, I was only 2.5 years into my federal paper, and I'm like my supervision officer was always he loved me. He hardly ever had to deal with me because I was just doing what I was supposed to do. And I remember he came over and I was like, man, I know I can't get a passport or leave the country on paper. I was like, I don't know what to do about this. He's like, well, write the judge and see if he'll release you early. And I'm like, I thought that doesn't happen. He says, well, I can't recommend it. I can't go before and ask for it, but you can ask for it, and I'm definitely not going to stop it. And so I actually got a hold of a lawyer to draw it up, and my mentor gave me his lawyer's number, an old lawyer friend of his number, and I wrote him. He just told me, he said, write me everything that you're doing, that you've done since you got out. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of like a resume almost of my ministry work. Mm-hmm. And he sends me the thing. He types it up, sends it back to me later on, and he's like, I'm not gonna represent you because I don't want to take your money. He says, after reading this, he's like, what I did is just type this letter up. You send it in. He says, you don't need me. Wow. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm like, oh, I was kind of scared because I was like, I wanted to be represented. I was like, I'll pay you. Just go with me.
Help me out.
And so I sent it to the judge, and sure enough, that same judge that sentenced me is who I had sent it to. And he wrote back. He let me off early, and
that's really cool.
I went down and
I wanted to ask you too, because that you going in and out of the prison, what does that feel like, and what are the reactions you get by you're walking the halls of the same places that you were as a prisoner? What's that world feel like to you now?
It's getting better. I remember the first few times, because I go to the same prison once a month right now, and the first few times I go outside of the fence to the minimum. We have a chapel service out there, mm-hmm. and then I go inside the fence. Now inside the fence, it's really different because they actually give us the keys and a radio. And they're back, going to go through 3 gates to get back to the chapel. Mm-hmm. And then they'll send all the inmates back. And I'm just like, me and the guy I go in with, he's also been to prison. Mm-hmm. And we're like, this don't feel right. We're not supposed to have keys and a radio.
Right. Right.
But it's just wild. And I joke with the guys there because I came the first time visiting and I just immediately felt called to just, make this my service. Cause I'm going to my goal is to eventually, because I'm badged in all the Oklahoma prisons, eventually go to all the Oklahoma prisons sharing my testimony, especially McAllister where I was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the one I'm going to now is Hominy. And they're like, I tell the guys all the time, I'm like, here's the deal. I was like, they were like, I'm glad you keep coming. And I'm like, I'll keep coming as long as they keep letting me out. But the first time they try to keep me, I'm not coming back. I promise you, I will cancel my reservation. I'm not coming back. So it's just a different feeling because I remember going to chapel services the whole time I was locked up and almost envying the people because I'm like, man, they get to go home. You know what I mean? I got to go back to the cell. Mm-hmm. So I just it's important to me. I mean, just to be able to go in there and I tell the guys.
I can't imagine that. It's got to be an incredible feeling and walking the halls and knowing what you did, how you made yourself a better version of yourself and be able to walk those halls back after being out and doing what you're doing. It's got to be an incredible feeling.
Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, it just it breaks me down every time. I guarantee the way home, I've got a 2.5 hour drive back home afterwards from where the prison is. And so the way home, I'm just, I don't even listen to music. I'm just,
taking it all
just in awe. Just like, cause I mean, I know, I'm kind of an empathetic type of person, man. I put myself in their shoes and I know those guys, they heard what hopefully is a good message and they're going back to their cells. And I hope it's really planting seeds in them, you know
Absolutely.
what I mean? And I'm just praying over those seeds and just thinking, man, I remember what it was like going back to the house for count time after. Yeah. I'm like, it's just different. But I tell the guys, I'm like, man, I get it. You know what I mean? I can actually say I've been where you're at, and that goes a long way.
It means a lot. I think for people to come in that have been in, that creates a whole different version to the feeling that I think they get from that visit. I always ask everybody, Brian, you've lived one of those lives that, you read about and how you turned it around and how you are living the life that you want to live now. What do you think's your biggest takeaway through all that?
Well, I'd say, number one, you're never too far gone for the Lord. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I thought I'd done too much wrong and I grew up in a legalistic, style of church that taught me that, like there's going to be, you knock or he knocks and you don't answer. And there's going to come a time that he's going to knock and you don't answer, or vice versa. And so it's like, there's nothing you've done that's too bad that, it's not worth redemption, and that's the big thing for me. That's the big takeaway. And that, like, no matter how far you've gone, both not just in the, like with the Lord, but also just in life, you're like, now, I said I didn't have anybody, everybody gave up on me. Well, all the same people that gave up on me, including myself, now believe in me. You know what I mean? Those same people, they've came back into my life and now I know that the scripture in Philippians, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now I know that literally, there's nothing that's impossible. You know what I mean? Like the Lord opens a door and no matter what it is, I can walk through it. You know what I mean? And that's a lot, you know what I mean? Because, he's, I tell people all the time, I don't ever try to preach the prosperity gospel, mm-hmm. but the Lord has blessed me more than I can ever imagine, not just financially, but emotionally, physically, in every which way. But most of all, it's just like he's returned everything that the enemy took from me. Yep. And that enemy a lot of times was myself. You know what I mean? So everything that was squandered away, like I've shared my testimony a lot of times with the story of the prodigal son. And I was that prodigal son, you know what I mean? Like, but when I came back to the Lord, he's like, get the robe and the fatted calf and a signet ring and let's go. I mean, like you were restored 100%, 100-fold to where you were, you know what I mean? So, and that's really what I'm living each day. And, I tell people, I'm not trying to brag. On anything but God, you know what I mean? I've got, everything that I ever,
you're living it, Brian.
Yeah.
I think here's my card here. I keep it in my wallet, and I've got these leather bands that a guy named Magic made for me. So there's two things I have that really kind of steady me into the fact that if I'm having a bad day, it ain't that bad. It's not that bad. because it can be a lot worse. But
I actually, when I go into the
humbling.
prisons, when I go into the prisons, the Bible I take in there, which is the only Bible I got, is my Bible for that I got when I graduated Victory Bible Institute, the Bible college in prison. But I carry with me this is one of the chapel service schedules.
Wow.
And I tell it, I always share with the guys, like, that's all the chapel services we had. And I remember them all like they were yesterday. And I carry those because, I tell people on the outside here, like, if you ever get a chance, an opportunity to go into a prison chapel, you'll see a different lifestyle. Like those guys, they got nothing but God, but they need nothing but God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that jailhouse, everybody has a preconceived notion on jailhouse religion, but like I said earlier, it's not cool to be a Christian in prison. So if they're in the chapel service, they're going to get persecuted in their own little way. Cause even though I had respect on the yard, some of my guys would just like, oh, you going to the church again? They'd kind of make fun of you or whatever. But at the same time, it's like, you know what? Like, if they're in there, they're getting it all.
I think that, I remember Romo, the second guy I interviewed on this podcast 80 some odd interviews ago. He said, don't take away hope if hope's all they have. That could be the only thing that somebody's living on is hope. And that's the last thing you want to take away from somebody. Brian, I think what you're doing is incredible. It's so refreshing to hear somebody, take a really bad, hardcore experience and get through it, grit it out, and then give it back. And the way you're doing it, because it's not easy going back in there, but I know that it fills you up. And I just really appreciate you coming on. And I think, you probably helped some people today. And, and I want to tell people, if you have somebody that, if you get something out of this, share the show. It helps. Share it out. And if you got time, and I know it's a hassle, but it's a big deal for the show. If you can leave a review on Apple or Spotify, it kind of puts the show on steroids the way that they promote it in the algorithm. I've got a book out there, Nightmare Success. It's all about my life, and you can get it in Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can even get it at Walmart. And if you want to get a hold of me or anything about me, BrentCassidy.com. And like I used to say when I was typing my emails back from Leavenworth to the outside, stay strong. I'll do the same. Brian Williams, thanks so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
I was going to say also, the ministry, if anybody wants to reach out, Not by Coincidence Ministries, that's to follow the prison stuff going in. We actually, it spawned out of a friend of mine who wrote a book about his testimony. And those books we've been putting in all the prisons and jails and drug rehabs.
What is that again? What is that again, Brian?
Not by Coincidence Ministries.
Not by Coincidence Ministries. I'll put that in the show notes too. Yep.
All right.
Everybody, thanks for being here today. Brian Williams, thank you. Nightmare Success in and out.